Welcome to Everything Medical. Today's video, we shall be appreciating the histology of the pancreas, denoting those histological features that is being composed of the pancreas, which is mostly the acini comprising the exocrine portion of the pancreas and also the endocrine portion of the pancreas. But you have to understand that the pancreatic acini does not play any role in the endocrine portion of the pancreas. As we delve into this class, we shall unveil other histological features of the pancreas. So if you are coming across to my channel at the first time, don't hesitate to subscribe so that you get notification when I upload video on human histology, even anatomy, physiology, and biochemistry, and also embryology. Now let's proceed. These two diagrams depict everything that we shall be explaining on the histological features of the pancreas. This diagram here is called the pancreatic serous acini diagram because it denotes the pancreatic serous acini and also the centroacinar cells, right? We have pancreatic serous acini diagram. This diagram here denotes how the histological tissues are drawn in any medical board exam, or if you are trying to learn the diagram of the histological features. This is the diagram here, right? Why here depict the pancreatic serous acini? It does not mean that there is no serous acini in this diagram. There are serous acini here, right? So this is just to illustrate the component of the pancreatic serous acini. The first we shall be discussing is the introduction. First of all, before we delve into the histological features of the pancreas, we have to appreciate the introduction, which is the concept of the pancreas. Let's know what the pancreas is all about before delving into its histological features. What is pancreas? A pancreas is an elongated, soft, flat, lobular glandular organ. It is a soft, and also a flat lobular glandular organ, which is situated or located at the epigastric and left hypochondriac region. That is where pancreas is situated in the anterior abdominal region. Because if you are trying to locate where pancreas is found, you have to use the regions of the abdomen, particularly the epigastric and the left hypochondriac region. So the pancreas is an elongated, soft, flat, lobular glandular organ. Why is it called a lobular organ? It has a lobus. Yeah. As we proceed, you will get to know how the pancreas lobus are derived. Also, it is a glandular organ because it secretes something. Any organ that is glandular, it means that it secretes a particular substance. So the pancreas secretes a hormone through its endocrine function. It also secretes enzymes through its exocrine function. So that is the concept of the pancreas. The pancreas also extends from the concavity of the duodenum. It extends from the concavity of the duodenum. On the right, towards the spleen, and on the left, towards the posterior abdominal wall, retroperitoneally. You have to understand that the pancreas is a retroperitoneal organ. It is a retroperitoneal organ, except it tell that is an intraperitoneal component, or that is an intraperitoneal structure. The tail of the pancreas is an intraperitoneal structure. It is not a retroperitoneal structure, right? So the entire pancreas is covered by a connective tissue in the form of a capsule. In the form of a capsule. Capsule. It is covered by a connective tissue in the form of a capsule. Arising from this capsule is a septa. Is a what? A septa. Arising from the capsule is the septa, which extend into the gland, which is the pancreas, to divide it into lobules. Right? It extends inward into the pancreas to divide it into lobules. You have to understand again that the pancreatic islet cells of the pancreas are being surrounded by a network of reticular fibers. Yeah, are being surrounded by a network of reticular fibers. The pancreatic islet cells of the pancreas, or the islet cells of the pancreas, are being surrounded by a network of reticular fibers. The pancreas also is composed of two important functions. It is made up of two segments, right? The endocrine segment and the exocrine segment. The uh, the the exocrine component of the pancreas forms the bulk of the pancreas compared to its endocrine component. That is to say that the whole pancreas is mostly formed by the exocrine component, which is that part of the pancreas that is concerned with enzyme secretion, whereas its endocrine component is smaller compared to its exocrine component. Right? Now, you have to understand that the septa, which is this septa, arises from the capsule. I said previously that the entire pancreas is covered by a connective tissue in the form of a capsule. Now, extending from that capsule is the septa, or arising from that capsule is the septa, which extend into the pancreas to divide it into lobules. Right? These are those lobules. These are lobules that was formed by the septa when it extended to the pancreas. And those lobules contain serous acini cells, right? So these are the pancreatic lobules. Lobules. These and these are serous acini. They are the serous acini, right? Okay. The next we shall be discussing is the endocrine, or let's discuss the exocrine component of the pancreas first before we discuss its endocrine component. Before we delve into this component, you have to understand that the functions of the exocrine and the endocrine component of the pancreas are linked, they are interrelated. And where they are commonly linked is based on their embryonic derivation, because they are being derived from the endodermal lining of the gut. Have been derived from the endodermal lining of the gut. This is where they are being derived. Endodermal lining of the gut. That is where they have the most commonest linkage between two of them, right? Now let's discuss the exocrine component of the pancreas. The exocrine component of the pancreas is that part of the pancreas that is concerned with enzyme secretion. It is concerned with the production of enzyme, which aid in digestion of carbohydrate, fat, and protein. After the digestion, it gets absorbed in the gut, particularly the small intestine. After it has been absorbed, those nutrients will be carried or transported into the liver through the portal vein, where they undergo proper metabolism. Right? Now, this exocrine component of the pancreas also occurs in a form of tubulo or a compound tubulo-alveolar serous gland. It occurs in the form of compound tubulo-alveolar serous gland, right? Okay. Then we have established that it's concerned with enzyme secretion, right? And it occurs in the form of compound tubulo-alveolar gland, right? Important to note, the general histologic features of the pancreas is similar with the histological features of the parotid gland, right? But the only distinguishing features between the histologic features of the parotid gland and that of the pancreas are the endocrine elements in the pancreas. If not the component of the endocrine element in the pancreas, there would have been a 100% similarity between the histologic features of the pancreas and that of the parotid gland. So it is the endocrine element or the endocrine component of the pancreas that makes the histologic features of the pancreas to be different a little bit compared to the histologic features of the parotid gland because of its endocrine component. If it is only the exocrine component of the pancreas that is found on the pancreas, there would have been a problem in distinguishing the pancreas and the parotid gland, right? So that was an important clarification to note about on the histological features of the pancreas and that of the parotid gland. Yeah. Okay. The next we shall be discussing under exocrine component of the pancreas is the pancreatic capsule. The pancreatic capsule. What is the pancreatic capsule? The pancreatic capsule is a connective tissue that covers the pancreas. It is the connective tissue that covers the entire pancreas. Now, extending or arising from the capsule is the septa, which extend into the pancreas to divide it into lobes. Those lobes contains the serous acini or the serous acini cell, right? So here is the serous acini cell. Acini cell, right? Now, the next feature we shall be discussing under the exocrine component of the pancreas is the pancreatic acini. The pancreatic acini. This is a vital component of the exocrine segment of the pancreas. What is the pancreatic acini? The pancreatic acini is the secretory element of the exocrine component of the pancreas. It is the secretory element of the exocrine component of the pancreas, which usually appear to be long and tubular. Now, why is it called a pancreatic acini, or why is it called an acini? It is called an acine because it appears to be rounded or oval in section. It appears to be rounded or oval in section, right? And you have to understand again that the pancreatic acine aids in secretion of what? Of enzymes, the pancreatic juice. It aids in the secretion of the what? The pancreatic juice in the pancreas. That is, the pancreatic juice contains the enzymes, either the proteolytic enzyme, the amylotic enzyme, and the proteolytic enzyme. Those enzymes that digest carbohydrate, fat, and protein, they are being produced from the pancreatic acini in the pancreas, right? The pancreatic acini cells of the pancreas. And also, the pancreatic acini usually, they are highly basophilic in nature. They are highly basophilic in nature. That is to say that they are bluish in stain. They appear bluish in stain. They usually appear bluish stain, right? They usually appear bluish stain, and they have small lumen. The pancreatic acini has a very small lumen compared to the central or centroacini cell of the pancreas. Okay, there are some pancreatic acini that are found on the center, and that one is called centroacinar cells, and it has a distinct lumen compared to the pancreatic acini. The centroacini cell has a distinct lumen compared to the pancreatic acini, and the lumen of the centroacinar cell is being lined by a cuboidal epithelium. It is being lined by a cuboidal epithelium. That is the lumen of the centroacini cell, which is quite different from the lumen of the pancreatic acini. Now watch. Here are the centroacinar cell of the pancreas. Centroacinar cell of the pancreas, right? The centroacinar cell. The lumen of this cell is quite different from the lumen of the pancreatic acini or the serous acini. It is quite different because the lumen of the pancreatic acini is smaller compared to the lumen of the centroacinar cell, and the centroacinar cell is being lined by a cuboidal epithelium. That is what aligns it. Okay, right? Now, there exists what we call the pancreatic islet cell or the islet of Langerhans on this diagram. I'm going to denote it. As we proceed, we are going to be discussing the histologic features of the pancreatic islet cell or the islet of Langerhans. Right? Now, on the histological features of the pancreas, which is this, there is a space where the pancreatic acinar cell are being separated by an area where we see an aggregations of cells that is quite different from the pancreatic acinar cell or from those of the pancreatic acinar cell. That aggregations of cells are called the pancreatic islet cell or the islet of Langerhans. They are usually pale in appearance, which are arranged in a group. They are usually pale in appearance, which are arranged in a group surrounded by numerous blood vessels. You have to understand that the islet of Langerhans or the pancreatic islet is richly supplied with blood vessel. They are richly supplied with blood vessel, right? So this is it here. This is the islet of Langerhans or the pancreatic islet, because it is quite separated from the pancreatic acinar cell, because there is a space in this histological structure whereby the pancreatic acinar cell are separated by an area where we see an aggregations of cells. Here is that cell aggregation, which is quite different from those of the acinar cells. That exact aggregation of cell are called the islet of Langerhans. The islet of Langerhans, which can be called the pancreatic islet. This is the pancreatic islet or islet of Langerhans. Right? That is how they are being fashioned. This is our zymogen granules. Our zymogen granules. This is our intercalated dot. Intercalated dot. The next outline we shall be discussing under this exocrine component of the pancreas is the dot system of the pancreas. The dot system. The dot system of the pancreas. Now, what is all about the dot system of the pancreas? The dot system of the pancreas is just like a tube whereby the secretion produced from the pancreatic acini enters the duodenum to aid in digestion, because those secretions are the pancreatic juice, which contains the enzyme that digests carbohydrate, digests protein, and digests fat or lipid. So there is a dot, and that dot, which is the tube, is known as the dot system of the pancreas. So how does it happen? The first dot by which the secretion produced from the pancreatic acini enters through or passes through to get to the next dot is the intralobular dot, which can be called the intercalated dot. So the first dot it gets to is the intralobular dot. Intralobular dots. The pancreatic secretion produced by the pancreatic acini, which is the pancreatic juice, once it is being produced, it first enters the intralobular dot or the intercalated dot, and it is a small dot compared to other ones. So once it enters here first from the pancreatic acini, that pancreatic secretion, that is the pancreatic juice, will flow from the intralobular dot to the larger dot, which is called the interlobular dot. The larger dot is the interlobular dot. Once the secretion produced from the pancreatic acini flows from the intralobular dot to the interlobular dot, it will move next to the duodenum by passing through the main pancreatic dot and also the accessory pancreatic dot. So this is a smaller dot, this is a larger dot. So it enters into the main pancreatic dot and also the accessory pancreatic dot. And also the accessory pancreatic duct. The main pancreatic duct can be called the duct of Wasson, while the accessory pancreatic duct can be called the duct of Santoroni, right? Now, this main and accessory pancreatic duct opens into the duodenum in order to empty those pancreatic secretion produced from the acidic cell that was first entered into the what? Intralobular duct to the interlobular duct, and finally to the main pancreatic duct and the accessory pancreatic duct. The main pancreatic duct opens into the opens into the major duodenal papilla, while the accessory pancreatic duct opens into the minor duodenal papilla on the duodenum. The main pancreatic duct has a sphincter called the sphincter of Oddi. The sphincter of Oddi sphincter of Oddi. The sphincter of Oddi is a sphincter that regulates the exflux of those pancreatic secretion, which is the pancreatic juice, from the main pancreatic duct to enter the duodenum, right? This accessory pancreatic duct could have a sphincter or not, but this is more pronounced. The sphincter of Oddi is found at the major duodenal papilla, in which where their main pancreatic duct opens into the duodenum to empty those secretions produced from the pancreatic acidic cell, which is the pancreatic juice. Recall that those pancreatic juice which contains the enzymes are inactive in the liver. The pancreatic juice enzymes are not active in the liver. They are being activated in the duodenum. Had they been there active in the liver, they would have digested the pancreatic tissues. That is why they remain active. They remain inactive in the liver. In the pancreas. They are so inactive in the pancreas where they are being produced. Had they been there active in the pancreas, they would have digested the pancreatic tissues. That is why they occur in the pancreas in a form of what? Zymogenes. Zymogenes are inactive form of an enzyme which needs to be activated to become active in performing its what? Catalytic function, right? That is to say that the pancreatic juice enzymes are not active in the pancreas. They are usually being activated in the duodenum before they will begin to perform their daily catalytic function. So that is all about the duct or the duct system of the pancreas in respect to this histological class we are treating. Okay. Now watch. Here is that larger duct. Recall that the larger duct, which is the interlobular duct, is formed by a fibrous tissue, which is being lined by a columnar epithelium. It is being lined by a columnar epithelium. The larger duct by which those pancreatic secretion from the pancreatic acini passes through, which is this, is being lined by a columnar epithelium, and it also being composed of fibrous tissue. So here is that duct. It is called the interlobular duct. The interlobular duct. Why this is the smaller duct, which is the intralobular duct. Which can be called the intercalated duct. These are the ducts by which those pancreatic secretion, that is the secretion of the pancreatic acidic cells, flows through in order to be emptied finally into the duodenum through the main pancreatic duct and accessory pancreatic duct. So that is how they are being fashioned. The next outline we shall be discussing is the endocrine component of the pancreas. That is the hormonal component, the endocrine component of the pancreas. When we talk about the endocrine component of the pancreas, it is that component of the pancreas that is concerned with hormone production or hormone secretion. There are so many hormones that is being produced by the pancreas. We have the glucagon, the insulin, the gastrin, the somatostatin. We have the polypeptide hormones. These are hormones being produced by the pancreas. But the most important hormones that we'll be discussing here is mainly the glucagon and the insulin, right? So the pancreas tends to produce glucagon and insulin. After they are being produced, they are being emptied or transported into the liver through the portal vein, where they play a profound influence, or where they have a profound influence on carbohydrates, protein, and lipid metabolism, right? You have to understand that these two hormones produced by the alpha and the beta islet cells of the pancreas have a profound influence on carbohydrate metabolism, lipid metabolism, and protein metabolism, right? That is for the endocrine component of the pancreas, because it is a component of the pancreas that is concerned with hormonal production, right? Now, this endocrine component of the pancreas, it appears in a form of numerous rounded collection of cells. It appears in a form of what? Numerous rounded collection of cells, which are embedded within the exocrine part of the pancreas. That is why the exocrine part of the pancreas forms the main bulk of the pancreas, because the each endocrine component is just like a small segment of the pancreas. As you can see, the endocrine component of the pancreas appears in a form of numerous, it appears in a form of what? Numerous rounded cellular or collection of cells. Numerous rounded collection of cells which are embedded within the exocrine part of the pancreas. These rounded collection of cells are called the pancreatic islet, or the islet of Langerhans, which is the major thing that is concerned with the hormonal production in the pancreas, constituting the endocrine component of the pancreas, right? Now, you have to understand again that each of these islet cells, or the islet of Langerhans, are surrounded by alveoli. They are surrounded by alveoli, which are being separated from this alveoli by a fibrous, or by a thin layer of reticular fibers, not fibrous, please, not fibrous, because that was in a different concept, right? Each of these islet cells are being surrounded by an alveoli, which are being separated from this alveoli by a dense layer of reticular fibers, by a dense layer of what? Reticular fibers, right? Because I said previously that the pancreatic islet are surrounded by a network of what? Reticular fibers, right? They are being surrounded by a network of reticular fibers, which separate it from the alveoli of the pancreas, right? So that is those features of the endocrine component of the what? Of the pancreas. The next are those cells that are responsible for hormonal production in the pancreas. We have the first is the alpha cell. We have the beta cell. We have the delta cell, we have the PP cell. These are the cells that are responsible for hormonal production in the pancreas. So we shall be starting with the alpha cell. The alpha cell of the pancreas can be called the A cell, right? Can be called the A cell. Now, pay attention. All these things are the component of the islet of Langerhans. They are the component of the islet of Langerhans, or the pancreatic islet, right? In the pancreatic islet, the alpha cells are organized or tends to be arranged towards the periphery or the cortex of the islet of Langerhans, because inside the islet of the Langerhans, the alpha cells tends to be organized or arranged towards the periphery or the cortex of the islet of Langerhans. The alpha cells constitute 20% of the pancreatic islet, and it has small granulars. It has small granulars, right? It has what? Small granulars, which is brightly stained by acid fuchsin. It is brightly stained by acid fuchsin. Yeah, acid fuchsin. It is brightly stained by acid fuchsin. It is not stained by an aldehyde fuchsin. It is the beta cell that is being stained by what? Aldehyde fuchsin. When we get to the beta cell, you will understand their differences on their staining mechanism. So the alpha cell is being stained by what? Acid fuchsin. It is not being stained by an aldehyde fuchsin. And these alpha cells, when viewed on an electron microscope, it appears to be rounded or ovoid on a section. Now, what does it secrete? The alpha cell secretes the glucagon. It secretes what? Glucagon hormone. It secretes glucagon, right? So the next we shall be discussing is the beta cell. The beta cell of the pancreas can be called the B cell, right? It can be called the B cell. And this beta cell, in the islet of Langerhans, the beta cell tends to be arranged towards the center or the medulla of the islet of Langerhans. Recall that the alpha cells are arranged towards the periphery or the cortex, while the beta cell are arranged towards the center or the medulla of the islet of Langerhans. And this beta cell constitutes 70% of the pancreatic islet, whereas the alpha cell constitutes 20% of the pancreatic islet, right? Okay. This beta cell has larger granulars. It has what? Larger granulars compared to the alpha cell. The alpha cell has what? Smaller granulars, right? And the beta cell is being stained by an aldehyde fuchsin. An aldehyde fuchsin. It is being stained by an what? Aldehyde fuchsin. And when viewed on the electron microscope, it appears to be fewer and larger, and has lower electron density. What does it secrete? It secretes the insulin. The beta cells or the beta islet cell secretes insulin, while the alpha islet cell secretes glucagon. Let's dive into the delta cell. The delta cell, right? The delta cell. The delta cell of the pancreas can be called the D cell or the type 3 cell. It can be called the type 3 cell. Type 3 cell, right? The delta cell can be called the type 3 cell. Now, this delta cell, inside or in the pancreatic islet, they are being arranged towards the periphery of the pancreatic islet. It is being arranged towards the periphery of the pancreatic what? Islet. And it stains black in silver stain. It stains black in silver stain. That is for delta cell. It stains black in silver stain. And they resemble the granules of alpha cell. The delta cell has the same resemblance on its granules with the alpha cell. That is why it resembles the alpha cell granules, which stains acid phosphine on the microscope. But they have a distinguishing feature from the cell that produces glucagon, which is the alpha cell. That is why this delta cell can be called the A1 cell. A1 cell. Why this can be called the A2 cell, right? And since it stains black in silver stain, it is called a gyrophil. This is the feature that distinguishes it from the alpha cell, because it stains black in silver stain. So it is what? A gyrophil, right? It is a gyrophil. Whereas the alpha cell is not a gyrophil. That is why the delta cell is referred as A1 cell, while the alpha cell is what? Referred as A2 cell. So the difference is that the delta cell is a gyrophil and it is called A1 cell, while the alpha cell is what? A2 cell, right? But they have the same resemblance with the granules of the alpha cell, right? Okay. Now, what hormone does it secrete? But before we dive into that, when you view alpha cell on the microscope, right, it appears to be rounded or ovoid, which have lower electron density, right? And it secretes gastrin and somatostatin. It secretes what? Gastrin and somatostatin. Gastrin and somatostatin. Secrete gastrin and somatostatin, right? Okay. The PP cell is a type of cell in the pancreas, which is an islet cell that secretes what? Polypeptide hormone, or pancreas polypeptide hormone. That is what it secretes. So that is all about the cells of the islet of Langerhans, or the pancreatic islet. Now, the next which I'll be discussing is the blood supply. The blood supply, right? The blood supply. The pancreas is supplied by a very rich vessel. It is a vascular structure, especially the pancreatic islet, that is being supplied by a dense capillary plexus or vessel. That is what they supply through their connective tissue. The pancreas is a richly supplied gland, especially the dense capillary plexus that supply the pancreatic islet, because the pancreatic islet is richly supplied with blood vessel. The nerve supply. The nerve supply of the pancreas is essential because it is richly supplied by a nerve, especially the pancreatic islet, or the islet of the pancreas is being supplied by an autonomic nerve. It's also being controlled by noradrenaline and what? Acetylcholine that was delivered through the nerve endings when it is being supplied to it in order to influence the secretion of the islet cells, or the islet of Langerhans, right? To tell you that they are being supplied by numerous nerve endings. It's also been what? Innervated by myelinated or unmyelinated fibers, and also some multiple neurons which also innervate them. So That is it. The next is the clinical correlation. The clinical correlation. Clinical correlation. Clinical correlation. We have number one is the acute pancreatitis. Acute. What is acute pancreatitis? It is an acute inflammation of the pancreas presenting clinically acute abdomen. It is mostly seen or being visible in adults ranging from 40 to 70 years. But it is more prevalent in female compared to male. That is acute pancreatitis, an acute inflammation of the pancreas presenting clinically acute what? Abdomen. Number two is chronic pancreatitis. Chronic pancreatitis. What is chronic pancreatitis? A chronic pancreatitis or chronic relapsing pancreatitis is a progressive destruction of the pancreas caused by repeated mild or subclinical attacks of the acute pancreatitis. That means before it will get to chronic, it might have been on acute state. So it is the worsened state of acute pancreatitis that results to what? Chronic pancreatitis. So that is all about the clinical correlation or the histological correlation of the what? Pancreas. I believe you enjoyed the class, right? You enjoyed the class from the introduction to the clinical relevance, right? Thank you so much for staying to the end of this class. I really appreciate.